Hey guys, welcome to episode 1 of DP Deconstruct, and this is where we're going to take some of our images and kind of our thought process behind each image and video and kind of workflow. And so, Aaron, why are we here? What are we doing? And
well, I can tell you we're not doing this because we love doing videos of ourselves and explaining on how to do things. We're actually kind of both anti that. We've talked about wanting to do it for years. We just never have because honestly, we don't prioritize it, right? But we get a lot of questions, about how did you guys make this shot? What were you thinking? How did you determine how to make this look this way? Or, break down your shots.
You guys should do this, right?
And so how many times we've been told we need to make tutorials, and we've actually talked about it for a long time. I've done, I don't know how many questionnaires. I'm like, hey, what do you guys want to learn? And
I can tell you that I don't desire to start a YouTube channel and make lots of YouTube videos. Let's be honest.
No, it's just more work.
40 years old.
Right.
But this, with that being said, it is something we get asked a lot. We get, Instagram, hey, what'd you guys do? What product did you use? What, what camera, what light, whatever. And so that's kind of the whole idea behind this whole idea of DP deconstruct. So with that being said, a DP, what is a DP when we say that?
So on the scheme of like the list of different positions on a shoot, right? You have your producer, you have your director, and then the DP is under that. And what the DP does, the director of photography, is the DP's job to take the vision of the producer and the director and put that into an image. So you actually have to say, like, let's use this as an example. Let's say that the director says, we're really wanting to build a scene where a hunter tags his buck and he is going to harvest him, going to pick him up, and he's admiring his buck. Well, the DP's job is to say, okay, I have your vision. Now let me build that scene in camera using lighting.
What camera I should use,
lenses,
what lens, focal length, whatever, aperture, those kind of things. What camera brand, what best fits this to get the
We are
director's
Sony
vision.
guys.
Yeah.
But Sony's not always the best one.
Yeah. And the reality is we're directing photography. And so one of the biggest things I think is the biggest misconception of the photography or video industry is, let me go buy a really nice camera and now I'm a photographer or I'm a video person. And the reality is gear does matter. I am not a person that's like, oh, gear doesn't matter. Like, it really does. It makes things easier, allows you to be more creative, and ultimately it does create a higher produced look or image. And that's just a big part of it. But I think the worst thing that you can do is really not understand light. This camera is nothing without light. Ultimately, all it's doing is the amazing sensor and the amazing capabilities is just capturing what is there.
What you put
in front of it. What you put in front of it. So understanding lighting is the number one thing a director of photographer should know and ultimately is doing, because I don't know anything about the lens choice or the thing without knowing the lighting situation. And so that's one of the biggest things that we'll probably be talking about when it comes to breaking down an image or a video. But there's also going to be other things that we begin to tackle, whether that's color grading or post-production or gear that we use. And it might not exactly be DP oriented, but a lot of it starts with like, how did we, tackle this image?
Yeah.
Right?
One of the questions I've been asked a lot is, where people want help is building story. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't at all fall underneath the job of a DP, but we will cover that because it's important to know. A lot of times let's be real, in our space, right? What we probably do 50% in the outdoor industry, really heavy this in the winter and the fall. Yeah. And then, but in the summer, we do a lot of corporate. But in this outdoor space, there's not a lot of designation of what role you're in, right? The budget is usually not there. You don't usually have your producer, director, DP, AC. You don't usually have all that. And so you're filling more roles than just one. And so we will cover, how do you build a better story? How do you become a better editor? How do you... whatever. Why is this piece of gear so good? But the majority of our stuff is probably going to be centered around how did you build a scene? Yeah.
Well, with that being said, let's tackle our first image. And the reason we chose this image, we shot this in November of this year. And I don't know about you, but for me, it wasn't the thing that I was like, oh, yay, we get to go do, because at 7:30 p.m. I was out hunting and filling deer feeders on my own property, and I got a phone call from you that said, hey, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And I know with that question usually entails there's work involved.
Yeah. And we'd already both worked a full day.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it just, you want to do this for a living, get ready for some long hours because it's coming. But right, we got into this. I called you at 7:30. Josh Pretzer, he's the hunter in this scene. He called me right at last light, said, basically my deer's down. We need to get some video. And we had already talked. We knew whenever he shot his buck, we knew what we had to get. We knew our deliverables. A lot of this, we didn't just do this because it was fun and we wanted to go out and play with cameras and lights. We have deliverables because Josh, he is one of my best friends, but he's also a client.
Yeah.
And we have to provide content for him that makes him valuable. He's very well known.
Yeah, he shoots habitat management series. He's sponsored by multiple companies, and for him, this is the reward for all of the work that he puts in January through August or September, right? And so this is a big deal for him, and that's one of the things that you and I know when we get that phone call, it really does take a priority, and we have to kind of stop what we're doing because at the end of the day, we have to get Josh what he needs for an entire year sometimes in one evening.
Well, and this deer harvest legitimizes everything he teaches throughout the year.
Yeah.
And so he is known for having quality content. And so we have to make sure that we're delivering when this is what makes everything worthwhile. We have to make sure this is good quality.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Where do you want to go first?
Well, I think, first of all, and the reason I started with that story is it was hard is let's go over what it took. Like 7:30, I get a phone call. I know it's 30 minutes just to get to my house. I know that Josh is another hour and a half away. It's not like we're showing up at 9, leaving at 9:30, calling it good. Like we got home at 3:30 a.m. because of how far and long and how entailed this whole thing was. And I just say that because there's a lot that went into this one shot. And so when, Aaron and I, we've literally, we own a production company in Wichita, Kansas. We know each other really well. And so we went into a 10-minute phone call of what do we bring? What are we doing? How do we do it? And so right away, Aaron was like, I have my FX6 ready. I have it packaged out, ready to go. I'll bring that. And then I said, well, we're both gearheads, but I'm especially in the lens department. Yeah. And so I was like, I'll grab my SKB full of lenses and my A1, and we needed photos. And so I said, I'll bring that stuff. And then we talked through lighting because lighting was going to be one of the biggest obstacles. One of the things about this is this deer was at least, I don't know, close to half a mile off the first major road. It just got done raining. We knew we're not, there's a lot of,
not off the first major road.
Yeah.
Off the road. We were 800-900 yards into a field.
I should say a drivable road.
Right. Especially in the mud. We knew we weren't able to even take a truck into the field. So we had, in our minds, we were going to be walking to where this deer was at. And so you hadn't been on this field before, I don't think, but I've been on here. I knew it was an 800-yard trek. Yeah. At least to where he was shooting. He told me, I had an idea where he shot the deer. He told me. And so I knew we were going to have to walk through a cut bean field. It's just been raining, all kinds of mud, like so much so that we can't drive a truck, obviously. We didn't even know we were going to have the UTV. So we brought a key light, we brought a rim light. We knew they both had to be battery powered. So I guess I can cover the key light. We had a Nanlite 60, Mixpanel 60, which was powered off of a V-mount. And basically what that is, this light that we have above us, it's the little brother to that. The reason that we chose this light, obviously, one, it was battery powered. Two, the other thing that was going to be important was that we had adjustable Kelvin. It's a RGB WW. And so we had that. We could make it dimmable, and it could be a hard or a light, or a hard or a soft light source. Yeah. And then you brought your
Forza 60 D, which is just a hard, continuous strobe for lack of a better word. And so it was just a hard source, but it throws a lot of light. And I also have an adapter that allows it to be battery powered. And we knew that would be a light source that we could throw on a light stand and, get a lot of light if we needed to. And so those were kind of our choices right off the bat. We knew that. Mm-hmm. I do laugh because usually, Aaron's known for this industry, especially in the last 2 years. I'm the one who went out late at night with Josh to shoot these photos because Aaron was out and about and nowhere. So I will say real quick, like, it's always good to be able to throw ideas and work with somebody, and right away we walked into those roles really well. And
Yeah,
so,
like you had mentioned before, I had my FX6 ready to go. You had your A1 pretty much ready to go, and we got in the car and we're driving up. I think we met an hour outside of Josh's, and it was, hey man, I've got my rig. Why don't I just cover video?
Yeah.
You cover photo. Obviously, we both do both.
Yeah.
When you own a production company, you pretty much wear a lot of hats. But
Yeah.
we knew in this one it'd be easier for us if we could go in focused on one style of shooting,
Yeah.
right? So you went into photo. We shot video first. Because I don't want to say it was more important, but there were more video deliverables
Yeah.
than photo.
And when we
deliverables.
got there, we noticed some obstacles right away. Like, the deer is sitting in what I would call a pretty boring spot.
Very.
Yes, it was 800 yards off the road. Yes, we had the UTV to get us there, and we were thankful we didn't have to walk into that. But at the end of the day, there was no depth, foreground, nothing for that. We had a black abyss of half a mile to the road we just came from.
Right.
And it was boring. And so even though we had these 2 lights or maybe 3 lights, we knew we needed something to bring interest into the shot right away, which is where the UTV came in. And we utilized that as a motivated light. And so talk about what is a motivated light and the importance of that.
Okay, so a motivated light, you can use a motivated light to motivate any light in your scene. We'll talk about the headlights for the key light. We use the headlights to motivate, where is this orange light coming from, or this tungsten light coming from? Because if you just have light, then it doesn't make sense. It looks artificial, and you want your scene to look.
So if you would have taken this, and we see this a lot in these kind of photos, is like, hey, there's a deer in the middle of the field at night, and it looks like they took a flashlight and lit this whole scene or whatever.
Or it's been lit by a UFO or something.
Yeah, like, where did this light come from?
Right.
And so I think it's important to note this headlamp right here. So we have the UTV motivating all of this light. It's spilling in everywhere. You see the light coming in every direction. And so your brain's putting it together. And then you have this headlamp. If we undo all that stuff I just made, pretty messes here. And then we're using this as really highlighting the front of that deer. And so those are our 2 practical lights, and your brain is literally putting together like, oh, it's lighting this whole scene. That's kind of the idea of motivated light.
So outside of motivating where that light's coming from, what else does having a motivated light do for a scene? Like, obviously we're not, our key light obviously isn't at the same angle as the headlights. So what else does having a motivated light do where it allows you, it's almost, in some ways it's easier.
Yeah. And so exactly, because your brain is kind of gapping together all of those things, it allows for a lot of, adjustability, forgiveness in that sense. And so ultimately, I'll kind of show on this on this picture where our key light is, and then talk through kind of the mindset of how we use that to work with the motivated light. And so we have our mix panel. This is our Mixpanel 60. Again, it's a V-mount, regular V-mount power light. It's fully bicolor, and so that allowed us to,
adjust the Kelvin to match.
Adjust the Kelvin. So, I'll let you talk through that part of it. How did we use that to work with that motivated light?
Right. So we came in, and one thing that's important to do when you're motivating a light is that your light source that you're bringing in to work off of that motivated light, it needs to match, right? So these headlights are roughly 3,400 Kelvin. So we needed to bring a light, which was the Mixpanel 60, that we could adjust the Kelvin to match that same light color temperature that the headlights are letting off. So that way it looks natural in the scene.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is have a 3,300 Kelvin headlamp and then a 5,600 key light. It's obvious that it's not right.
Yep.
So we used that Mixpanel to match not only the color temperature, but also the intensity level of what we would imagine it came through, while still hitting our exposure that we needed to hit.
Yeah. And when I just want to talk through when I say forgiveness a little bit, like what's happening, because this light is literally spilling all of this light. Like, there's no way the UTV motivated light is actually working. Like you see the light right here in front, like that would be a shadow the entire time. This light on the backpack up here, that would be a shadow. The light on this leg up here, that would be a shadow. And we would just be casting an entire shadow over our deer, right? Ultimately. But because your mind is going, that is the light that I see, or where I see that light coming from, it's naturally almost like when I say forgiveness, it's going, oh, that light's just wrapping around really nice and beautiful.
Yeah, you don't think about it because your mind just almost assumes that motivated light is what's lighting the scene instead of actually having artificial light in there. That's what you're always going for. You want to make it look as natural as possible. So you already mentioned the headlamp. One thing I want to note on the headlamp that Josh is using is very important. It's not just a headlamp that we grabbed out of a bucket of different headlamps, right? If you can control a light, if it's possible to control any aspect of a light, you want to be able to.
Yeah, so the more controllables, the more you're able to shape what you want.
The better you can make. Yeah, exactly. And so with this headlamp, I chose it because you can dim it down. We had this light barely on. And if you've ever shot with a headlamp on any scene, the headlamp can really, really quickly overpower a scene. So I wanted to be able to dim this down to where we weren't losing information on the deer. There's a few places where we might have lost some information, but that's literally as little as we can get. You can still see the detail in the deer's face. You can.
And it's because it's a hard source and it's a direct light. And so when we had that thing down as much as we could, that was the uncontrollable that we did have. So we could control a little bit, but at some point you're still running into the uncontrollable.
And that's allowing us to keep information as much as we can. And there's a little bit of forgiveness when you're shooting with this, because we have information on the face, we have information on his hands, we have information on most of the antlers. There's one or two spots where we lost information. And so that's a little bit forgivable. Why don't you go in, Matt, into the rim light and what we were thinking with the rim light?
So this is one of the things I would say first and foremost is like the reason we were like, we need these two lights for sure, is we knew we were shooting in pitch black, right? When you're shooting on a pitch black background, you and I both are like this. We are rim light freaks, like more than a fill light, more than any other light. Like
half the time.
Yeah, that rim light is so important. And I would also say this, like one of the first things we did is we're not turning on the key light first. We're actually figuring out that rim light first.
Right.
And so we have our uncontrollable UTV, our motivated light coming from here. And so with our rim light, this is another, yes, it's controllable, but in some ways, if I were to buy this light again today, now they have a bicolor version of it. Right. We didn't have that luxury when I first bought it. I just need to, get the newer version of it. The list trust me, the list is a mile long. With that being said, we have the Forza. I'm just going to write down what it is. Forza 60D, and this is a continuous light, and this light throws, a lot of light. And the cool thing about it is you can power it with some NPF batteries if you buy the little adapter. And so we could put it on a small stand, and again, this light is stuck at 5,600 Kelvin. And so now we have one thing I will say, like when you're putting your rim light, you're typically putting it 180 degrees within, give or take, of your key light.
Almost opposite.
And what happens with that's what's creating the rim. If your key light's over here and our rim light's over here, this key light is really, telling the story, but this rim light is making sure that your subject isn't just one dimensional. Right. And so right off the bat, you can see that we have light pouring in, and if we didn't have this rim light, this backpack and all Josh black coat, this backpack's really dark, even the deer, like all of that would just be in a black abyss and you wouldn't really see it. When I say dimensional, like it's actually adding depth to this shot.
Well, and honestly, on the deer, you can see where the rim light's not hitting right in front of that that front leg.
And it's just an abyss.
The whole deer would look like that, and we would have lost a lot of information. And again, we talked about Josh having sponsors. One thing, a lot of sponsors nowadays, I don't know if you know this, like I'm sure if you're in the space at all, you know this. Sponsors don't want that grip and grin.
Like their product right out in front, like obviously this is posing,
They want it to be like, oh, Josh shot this giant deer. I wonder what bow he uses, or I wonder whatever he uses. And so we wanted to be able to highlight it without making it be obscene, right? And so what this rim light is doing is it's allowing you to be able to tell what is being used, yet it still looks natural and it still looks like
Exactly. And so that backpack's not falling into the abyss, but there's also another motivated light. And so when we're saying a lot of times, when we say motivated light, it doesn't have to be in the frame.
Right.
For example, if we are shooting an interview for a corporate setting and you want to use a window as a light source, that's a motivated light. Whether there's a window there or not, you're making it look like there's a window there.
Right.
If there's the sun can be a motivated light, a lamp can be a practical or motivated light, or fill in the blank, and you're really utilizing a natural light source to motivate the entire scene.
Right.
And so with this rim light, 180 degrees from our key light, we have the 5600 Kelvin. We can't adjust that, and so we're wanting it to look like a moonlight. Moonlight's typically a white or a bluish light in this,
blue.
like a hint of blue. And so you can see a lot of that on the belly here. You can see it on Josh's backpack. You can even see it on his hat and his thing. And if you look really hard, you can even see it on the UTV. So the UTV actually has like, hey, it's not just two bright lights coming out of the black abyss.
Exactly.
And you'll also see it like in the foreground right here. You'll see it right here. When I say when we throw light everywhere, this light is so good at that because we took off that reflector and it's throwing light pretty much 180 degrees.
Yeah, I think it's 160 degree.
Yeah, it's a
We'll have to
beaming.
look
It's like
up,
160, 170. And when I say a lot of light, it's just throwing it everywhere. And so we had to be, it was one of those like, hey, Aaron, slow that down 1%.
Right.
Throw it down.
I think
one
it was
more,
at like 13%,
Yeah.
if I remember right. It was low.
Yeah, low. Because it will really easily, because it's a hard source, overpower that key light.
Yeah.
And so we just want it to, again, motivate that there is a bright moon on this awesome day and you just happen to shoot it. And you can even see like the hint of blue in the fog, and we'll talk about that later. But ultimately, that's what that rim light's doing, is it's making sure your subject has depth. It's separating him from the background, but we're also using it as a motivated moonlight that's picking up a lot of different aspects of the image.
It's telling a story.
Yeah,
right. And
absolutely.
Like I said, we know that we, as DPs, we went in there knowing that Josh, one, and two, his sponsors wanted to build a scene of a hunter going in. He had just shot his deer. It's nighttime. He's driving up with the UTV. That was kind of figured out later. But we built it where he's driving up with the UTV to check out his deer that he just shot.
Yep.
And we wanted to motivate having some light to fill the black space or the dark spaces of the photo. Moonlight just makes sense, right?
Sure.
So we know we had the key light, the mix panel set to roughly 3400. We know that the Forza 60 was stuck at 5600 Kelvin.
Yeah.
How did we determine what we were setting our camera to be able to make sure that we had this look nailed down?
And that's good. That's a good question. And one of the things, like, we obviously know our camera is right here. And so let's just say this is our camera, our lens, whatever. This is our camera. And basically, if we're just going to go, well, our key light's at 3400, our moonlight would have been bright blue.
Yeah,
Right.
royal
like,
blue.
I mean, it'd been like royal blue, and
Yeah.
it would have looked really artificial.
Right.
And so we had to split that difference. And so sometimes it really is as much as going like, what do you think about this? Like 100 Kelvin at a time, really dialing that in. And so I think we ended up at like, I don't know, like 43 or 4,400.
I think it was 43.
Yeah. And so we're the camera's at 4,300 Kelvin, and that's basically setting the kind of the oranges, or that tungsten light still looks tungsten, but it also made sure our moon looked like a moon instead of anything,
And
artificial.
I would say in this image specifically, the two things we were looking at to be able to gauge that was skin tone. We didn't want Josh to look
obviously.
like a Oompa Loompa.
Yeah.
And two, like how much blue are we seeing in this moonlight? We wanted to have a hint of blue. We didn't. You can do it where you have super blue and it looks artificial. That's fine. You can also have it where it looks silver, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But we wanted just a hint of blue.
Well, and I'd also say, like, it's really important. It's why it's good to get it right in camera. Like, you know how easy it is to say, oh, we'll fix that in post. Well, guess what? Your dark image and it's super, you don't have a lot of
You
post.
lose a lot of latitude.
Get it right in camera. Trust me. Take the extra 5 minutes on set, get it right, then trying just to go. Like, that's one of the biggest things.
Well, and you want to talk about deliverables and doing this for a living. you're gonna spend a lot more time, which you aren't gonna be able to bill out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're gonna spend a lot more time fixing it in post than you would on the day of shooting.
Yeah.
So either you're gonna try to charge your client way too much money than you should, and there's gonna be somebody who can charge less or the same and deliver a better product, or you're gonna be giving your time away.
Well, and that's a good reality to talk about. Like, we were exhausted. I mean, it's 1 a.m., 2 a.m. when we were still shooting, and we were exhausted. And it is so easy just to go into this mentality of like,
It's good enough.
it's good enough, but like that good enough is going to cost you so much more time in that post production. And so, with that being said, like, I would also say, when we actually started with video first. We moved that key light and rim light pretty much every shot.
Almost.
Because we had a what we call establishing shot where you saw the UTV. So your mind instantly went to, oh, that UTV is the motivated thing that's doing all this.
Right.
But after that, depending on your angle and how that light interacted with the deer, with the subject, and with your camera, like, we moved those key lights. Hey, stick the key light right by 2 feet. Hey,
Right.
move that rim light down. Move it up. Hey, I need blessed angle. And it wasn't like I'm over here checking Instagram when I'm not on. Like, the roles, DP roles might change, but we're also collaborating in everything we do. So that way, we don't have to do it in post.
And with that, you're slowing down and speeding up the light too. So like, hey, that's too bright. Slow it down a little bit, because for the tight angles, you're bringing that key light in closer. Obviously, the closer you get, the more intensity you have. So you have to slow that light down quite a bit.
And the one thing I would also say is, like, whatever you can do, like, get away from flat lighting. We see it all the time, and it's really easy if you just go, hey, leave those two sources the same, and it's you're next thing you know, when you're moving, especially in video, all of a sudden you're moving to flat light, and you're like, man, something about the shot doesn't look right. Like, it's important to know those rules and get away from that stuff, because we see it all the time. I think that's one of the biggest things that I see that separates, like, somebody who really knows what they're doing is, I mean, they're making sure that their lighting angle is spot on all the time. And it might even be every shot you're changing. You and I we're really excited about this one. At some point, we will do a DP deconstruct of this project because it's so unique. But we've been there 6 or 7 times shooting. And there was a couple shoots that we only shot 3 or 4 shots for an 8-hour period, because we took that much time to build out, to light the room, the space, the scene, interact with talent, because at the end of the day, that's what separates. And we're actually putting that into a film festival because we're excited about the process and the turnout of it.
Right. And I will say too, like, I think this happens to everybody to an extent, especially when you're on a 2-man team. We got frustrated for about 10 minutes where we were like, we were over it, right, on this shoot. And what caused that frustration was that we had set the lights up, and because we actually inverted everything, right? And we had set the lights up, and we were just trying to shoot around bad lighting. And we were like, after about 10 minutes, we just both literally almost at the same time looked at each other and said, what are we doing? Just fix the lights.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when you're shooting and the lighting is correct. It's amazing how much more fun it is.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this
It allows
looks
you to be
so
creative.
good. Yeah.
It allows you to be more technical, and then it probably allows you to have more confidence to interact with your talent instead of being like, I just don't like this.
Right. Because if you know it's not right, you like don't put everything into it.
And we wasted 10 minutes of that shoot trying to make that work, when we're like, this is stupid, move the lights.
Yeah.
Like, they're battery powered.
And as soon as we fixed it, we're like, oh yeah, okay, now let's get back to shooting.
Why didn't we do that earlier?
Right.
Type of thing. So, all right, jumping back into this, I want to talk about post-production before we finish up. And I will say this, like, you and I are much more get it right in camera. We have a very natural look. I feel like a lot of the adventure outdoor space, it's easy to over edit or to overdo something. And so, but I have to point this out and make fun of Aaron, because Josh and I, when we first got there was atmosphere, for Aaron's defense. But we pulled the UTV up, and I think the exhaust and the cold and all that just had a little bit of atmosphere for video, and it allowed it to separate from the background. But when we were shooting photography, Aaron's over there trying to kick up atmosphere dust after the rain. Well, that didn't work out, but we knew we wanted it.
Right.
And what that did was, it's just another aspect of depth, right? So something in between the UTV and it also talks through the cold. It kind of gives it a feel. And so we weren't getting that. We didn't have a can of atmosphere, and I'm pretty sure that would have disappeared anyway. And so the one thing I did in post, when I sent this to Aaron, it was actually really funny because I sent the picture to him and all he responded is yes. Like there's a certain look we were going for, and that was it. And so in post, I added this like atmospherical haze that you see right here and right here. And it's just a cool like in between depth that kind of gives it a little bit more of a natural cool feel. And I also added just a little bit of clouds in the sky. In the rim, they're almost like a bluish color, like the moon is out, and you could just, it's bright enough to where it's clipping the sides of those clouds.
Right.
And so I don't know how much you'll be able to see that on YouTube, but that's kind of the idea of post-production. But outside of that, you're really trying to tell the natural story, get it right by lighting the space.
Well, and again, I want to reiterate something. We get asked a lot, like, how are your images so sharp, but yet so soft, right? And haze is a great way to make that happen. Like, you have great focus on your subject, but the background is soft. It makes the subtle, you have a subtle hint of that UTV in the background. It doesn't make it where it's like popping and distracting, but it's subtle. And to keep it natural, Matt was talking about, typically we want to have it where we're not spending forever in post.
Yeah.
This was, and on the video side, when I was looking at the camera, there was atmosphere, right? And it's a realistic part of the shot, and it's always better to get it in camera.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you can make it where you're setting your haze up or atmosphere, if it's possible to get that done in camera, that Matt would have saved, I mean, not a long time, but Matt would have saved time not having to mess with that.
Yeah, and again, I'll put some before and after, and in cameras, and we'll probably put some with and without the UTV, and you guys can see clips, see that. But Aaron, we shot an entire video. Like most of this project was video, and the only thing I would say about that is like you add a video element into things, it changes everything. One shot compared to 24 shots a second or whatever you're shooting in. Like at the end of the day. You start adding video elements, it does get more difficult. Is there anything you want to share about that one before?
No, I think just like what we had kind of talked about with video, I would say the biggest difference between photo and video, the biggest goal I think you're doing with any frame or shot or scene is you're wanting to tell a story.
Yeah.
Right. With video, you can use motion, you can use interaction with light, you can use camera motion, talent motion. There's a lot of things that you can do with video.
It's not that one's easier or harder than the other. It's really just
a totally different approach.
There's challenges to both. Like I feel like in some ways video is more forgiving because the shot might start off boring, but it can move into something more interesting. How the light is interacting with the camera or the shadow or the subject or whatever, like can actually help with making a shot interesting.
Exactly. And we have a shot where Josh is bringing this deer up, right? And we told him, breathe out really hard, right? Because you can get that cold steam coming out, and that's selling the idea of it's cold, it's winter, right? And we have the blue light to help interact with that. You can't do that. You can't have the steam moving through the shot in a photo. So in some ways, it's harder to tell the story with one frame than it is.
And I think that comes down to another thing, like no photography. Whether you only shoot video, like you are a director of photography. You're just having lots of photos move throughout your story, but you're still a photographer.
It's not called director of videography.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, I think that's the most important thing. I took college classes back in 2001.
Back when Noah was building the art.
Yeah, something like that. And everything I learned in those classes is still applicable today, because the truth is lighting basics of key lights and rim lights and fill lights and hair lights and backlights and every kind of lighting, like the principles there, technology is making it easier, better, and more dynamic. Accessible. Like, it used to be, it was just intimidating and overwhelming. So that was an excuse, but gone are the days that you should say, yeah, I just have a camera that makes me a photographer. Like, own your trade. You know what I'm saying? I think that's, if there's any advice I could give, like, own your trade. There's no reason to just go out and buy as much gear as possible to think you're going to be a better photographer. Like, make what you have, extend that beyond your measure. I think that's ultimately what got us into buying these cameras. We didn't buy because it was the new and upcoming gear. Like, we stretched color grading, we stretched dynamic range, we stretched every little bit of what we needed out of that. And there were times where we did not want to buy this camera,
I was 100%
and now we own three
against
of them,
it. Like I actually actively was against
we
it.
made another video that we didn't post at some one point of why you would choose one over the other.
And we need to make that video again, really. But yeah, I think that to what Matt's saying, like you need to get the most out of whatever you're using before you upgrade. And there are creators that we know of that they have more kit than we do, lighting and camera gear. They have even more than we do, or they have what we have,
a $50,000 camera, but yet we're still getting asked, "Hey, how'd you make that?"
Right?
Just
like
reality.
we shot something a few years ago, a project we were using Sony A7 IIIs, Sony A7R IIIs. They're 8-bit, and we were shooting it with an HLG profile, so it's kind of a baked in look.
Yeah.
Right. So we didn't have the latitude that we have now, and we put that project out. To this day, it's one of our favorite projects we've ever done because we lit it well. You know how many people in the space that should know it, like that
did you shoot that with red? Did you shoot this with
right? Did you shoot that with a red? And we're like, not even close. Like not even close.
But we slowed down. We built it out. We really directed the scene, and we go back. I mean, we were just doing this like 2 weeks ago, going back, and we're like, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And we don't say that about our work.
No.
We are the worst. I mean, it was like, that kind of sucked. We could have done better. We should have done this.
Well,
this
and I truly believe if you look back 6 months ago and you don't think, man, I wish I could have shot that now.
Yeah.
The project you were talking about
wrong.
that we're going to put into a film festival, even now,
it's already that way.
We haven't even uploaded it. I think, do you have the final render out yet?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so the final render is almost done.
I need to cut 4 seconds, 8 seconds out.
We're not even done with it, and we're already like, man, I wish I could have shot that now, right? And I think if you don't do that, the progression of what your abilities are, something's wrong. You need to work on,
and that's the key. Like that's the exciting thing about production and being a creative is like you're always growing. If you are the same you were 3 years ago, like hang your hat up. You know what I mean? Like,
or else really dive in.
Yeah, or do something that's gonna get you back excited and passionate. And the reason you got into this, because how many times we have worked on something and we go, how did we get here? You know, whether you're driving down 180 miles an hour on a freeway in Miami or flying 36 hours to break records in 4 different states to doing these crazy things. That's the exciting part of what we get to do. It allows, I've sat and interviewed people that their stories have literally made me weep with how powerful they are, because we get to tell that and bring it to life. But that's also why it's important to own your craft, to own your trade, to know the basics. Like if there's any DP out there that just thinks that you grab a camera and go, like, just do yourself a favor and learn the basics. Like I said, I don't need to do a YouTube channel, but this is based off, I got a phone call last night from my brother in Colorado, owns a production company, great at what he does. And he's asking us questions about this and this, right? Like, and one of the things that you and I said, like, know lighting, like know all of the difference, how they play a part. And this lens right here is 35 millimeter G Master 1.4. Aaron owns one. It's, you said, favorite lens. And my brother texts me and goes, hey, should I buy this Aperture 300C RGB WW panel light, which is a phenomenal light? We own that one. Yep. And this 35-1.4. And I instantly told him my answer, but I text Aaron just to see what he would say. And he goes, 300C. And so as much as your favorite lens, your glass, like,
that's saying something. Yeah.
You're going, hey, this 300C is very versatile. Yeah. It can do so much. And we both said it, like, I would probably take an iPhone or a really, cheap mirrorless camera with really good lighting over a red best cinema lenses, and I'm stuck with nothing. You know what I mean? But knowing that basics of lighting is important because you can apply that to anything.
And lighting can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be.
Oh, 100%.
Right. We've had shoots where we spend 5 minutes setting up lighting. And we have shoots like the film work that we have where we spend almost a full day lighting. And, there are a lot of shoots that we've been fortunate enough to be on where they do show up the whole day before to light. Like
an entire
full day with a crew of people, not 1 or 2 guys, a crew of people just to light that scene, because you can make it complicated. But I think a lot of people get, intimidated by lighting because it seems so complicated. We have a handful of lights here. One of them just went out. We have a handful of lights here, and this scene didn't take us that long to set up.
Well, and to finish this whole thing up, I don't want to get too winded, but I would say this, like, when you begin to understand those basics, photography is no longer a strive. It's exciting again. It's your passion comes back, your creative comes back, but it also opens up more opportunities. Like your confidence is gaining and people see that. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen and why we get asked questions. By no means am I saying we are the best. We are constantly learning. But Aaron and I were on a shoot with 40 people part of this shoot, and everybody had their roles. There was 3 camera operators, there's a director of photography, there's the producer, there's the director, there's the assistant director, there's the entire grip and gaffing team, there's multiple sound guys. It was so big and intense, and it's this amazing reality TV show. Blah blah.
We
blah.
went into it
I mean,
a little intimidated,
like.
Because it's a
really
big
was.
crew, and it was for a pretty big shoot, right?
Production out of Hollywood
Right.
that comes in. They know what they're doing. And I think the hardest part about that was like, should we be here? And within minutes, I mean, getting going, we're conducting interviews. We went from a camera op in some ways of just the DP really understanding, we know our stuff. I trust you. You guys take this. And we really shifted almost, yes, we were camera ops, but we really allowed him to operate in his role because there was 15 different rooms that were being lit in this, but they took 2 days to light all those rooms, to shift, to change. And I think that's the important thing is like, when you begin to understand these things, the opportunities because of your confidence is growing all the time.
Well, and both of us are vocal, very, and so a lot of times we're struggling with should we just shut up, right? But in that job that we did, we were both like, should I say something?
We knew it was wrong.
Right.
We knew it was wrong.
We knew that it wasn't right.
Be better.
It's a good way to say it. And so, both of us eventually in different times, like we weren't on this. Matt and I were in completely different scenes. Like not the same thing. We both were like, I don't think this is right. And this is why, right? If you ever tell somebody they're wrong, you better give them the why. Yeah. And, we did it respectfully. Obviously when you're on a shoot like that, you're hired for a role. And that's your role. Like,
you have to figure out real quick, do I even have a voice?
Right. And so we were respectful. We told him what we thought. The DP was great. And he listened to it. He was like, totally agree. You know what? You got this. And like Matt was saying, it let him go to somewhere else and not in the back of his mind be worrying about what we were doing. Yeah, that made us more valuable.
And it allowed him to be confident in the whole production of not having to look over his shoulder and wondering the whole time. Because when you begin to work with people who can really chat and talk through the same language, no longer are you like, oh great, what's this guy getting? I mean, we've literally talked about that, like, we're not using that shot, type of thing. So, that's just reality. And so, anyway, that's DP Deconstruct. The whole idea is literally taking the mindset of a director of photography, whether that's post-production, maybe it's story building, maybe it's color grading, whether it's, how to tackle a shot list, a gear reviews. Like that's what we want to do because, I think in the full realm of things, like sometimes it's overwhelming to even begin to understand or think in those ways.
Right. And I want to reiterate, we've kind of touched on a few times that we don't know everything. Like we're still learning. Like, we try so hard to just continue to learn. Now we are confident in our knowledge, right? And like Matt was talking about a video that we shot going over 3 things I liked about this over a mirrorless or whatever. I was watching it last week and I was like, I don't agree with that. That was Aaron, you're wrong. Like,
you're constantly learning,
and so I don't think that we know everything, but we're learning. And as we learn, we want to help you guys to, hopefully learn with us. And so if you guys have anything that you want us to dive deeper into or a different topic, a gear review, what do you think about whatever, right? And if we can do a review on it, we absolutely will. But give us ideas, give us topics, give us feedback. We definitely want to hear. But I mean, anything else? I think we pretty well beat this one to the ground.
DP Deconstruct.
Out.